His right hand trembled. Just once. 1 second. Preston Harlow was mid-sentence, closing a $2.3 billion deal in front of 12 of the most powerful investors in the country, when his right hand shook beneath the lights of a Chicago boardroom. He felt it before any of them did. He didn't stop. He pressed his fingers flat against the table, kept his voice iron steady, and finished the room the way he always had, with the kind of cold authority that made grown men lean forward and take notes. Preston Harlow's name was on hospital wings, university buildings, 2 federal structures along the eastern seaboard. For 47 years, he hadn't just run an empire. He had become one. What happens when the man the whole country calls untouchable starts cracking from the inside, and nobody around him is willing to say it out loud? Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe, and really I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The tremor stopped. Preston straightened his jacket, walked out of that boardroom with his chin up, and told himself it was stress. He had told himself that before. He would not be right this time. He had survived hostile takeovers, federal investigations, and 3 recessions. He was not prepared for what his own body was about to do to him. 2 weeks later, Preston forgot a name in the middle of a board presentation. Not a stranger's name. The company he had personally acquired 11 years ago, a company whose founding documents bore his signature. He covered it with a cough and moved on. But Nadine caught it. Nadine Okoye had been Preston's executive assistant for 14 years. She started keeping a quiet log on her phone, timestamps, incidents, every episode he waved away. Slurred words during late-night calls. 14 pounds gone in 8 weeks. The blackout during the $900 million Kellerman merger, pen rolling off the desk while Preston sat completely still for 4 full seconds, eyes open, seeing nothing. He refused every specialist she scheduled. Then he stopped refusing. Nadine found him once, at midnight, sitting alone in his office, staring at his own hand like it belonged to someone else. By the time the 8th specialist flew in from Stanford, Preston had stopped asking what was wrong. He had started asking how long he had left. The doctors came in waves. First from Johns Hopkins. Then Mayo Clinic. Cleveland Clinic. Stanford. 8 months. 35 specialists, neurologists, oncologists, immunologists, rheumatologists. Spinal taps. Full genome sequencing. Experimental imaging still waiting on FDA clearance. Every test modern medicine had to offer. Every result came back the same. Inconclusive. The final diagnosis, unknown progressive neurological decline, was the medical equivalent of a shrug. In plain language, Preston Harlow was deteriorating. Nobody could explain why. While Preston faded behind closed doors, his nephew Conrad Veal moved quietly. He volunteered for meetings nobody had called him to. He stayed in rooms where decisions were being made. He smiled at news that should have alarmed him. Conrad watched Preston far more than he ever listened to him. He had already added his name to 3 internal documents that had previously carried only Preston's signature. Not a single one of those 35 brilliant doctors had thought to look at his breakfast. Dale Mercer's alarm went off at 4:15 in the morning. He drove to the Regional Medical Supply Warehouse in Decatur, Georgia, in a 2014 Chevy Silverado with a cracked dashboard. Double shifts. Home. Dinner. Homework. Repeat. 9 years of that, without applause. Then the letter arrived. Not from Preston Harlow. From Nadine Okoye, who had tracked Dale down through a private investigator after every medical option collapsed. 2 pages. Careful. Precise. It told Dale everything he had spent 9 years choosing not to know. He sat at the kitchen table for 4 hours without moving. The triplets came home from school and found him there. Bex dropped her backpack at the door and looked at her father's face. "Dad, why are you crying?" Dale didn't have an answer. Theo picked up the letter and read it out loud without asking permission, because that was Theo. Rory sat down beside her father, took his hand, and said the words that would set everything in motion. Daddy. We should go. Theo made it sound simple. Bex made it sound like the right thing to do. And Rory, the quietest of the three, the one who read medical encyclopedias instead of comic books, didn't argue or push. She just looked at her father with the kind of calm certainty that 9-year-olds have no business carrying, and waited. She never pushed. She just saw. Dale sat there holding 9 years of a decision he'd made at 19, the settlement documents, the choice to walk away, to build something small and honest instead of chasing something large and complicated. He had never questioned that choice. Until that letter. He told himself he wasn't going for Preston. He was going because his daughter had looked at him with complete confidence, and he had never once, not one single time, been able to argue with Rory. He booked 3 children's tickets and 1 adult fare. They left Thursday morning. He told no one where they were going. And somewhere in a Manhattan skyscraper, a man who had already begun planning a funeral had no idea that a 9-year-old girl with a library card was on her way to ruin everything he had built. The phone call lasted 4 minutes. Conrad Veal was in the middle of a lunch meeting when his assistant slipped him a note. A man named Dale Mercer had signed into Harlow Capital's front desk. His registration listed 3 children as accompanying guests. Conrad excused himself from the table without finishing his sentence. Within the hour, he was on the phone with his personal attorney, Sheldon Greer, a man whose entire career was built on making uncomfortable truths disappear from public record before anyone thought to look for them. Conrad didn't raise his voice. He never raised his voice. He gave instructions the way a surgeon makes cuts, clean, deliberate, no wasted movement. A press release was drafted by Tuesday. Fabricated inconsistencies in Dale's background were quietly handed to 2 financial media outlets by Thursday. The narrative was simple: a desperate man chasing a dying billionaire's estate. Conrad shaped that story with the ease of someone who had been rehearsing it for years. He moved through all of it wearing the expression of a worried nephew. Almost nobody saw what was underneath it. Sheldon asked how far Conrad wanted to take it. Conrad didn't hesitate. By the time Dale stepped off the elevator into Harlow Capital's executive floor, Conrad had already decided exactly how this was going to end. He simply had not yet accounted for Rory. Nadine met them at the elevator doors. She looked at Dale for exactly 2 seconds, the jaw, the stillness, the quiet weight in his eyes, and whispered 3 words before the doors had fully opened. "You have his eyes." Then she turned and walked ahead without another word, heels sharp against marble floors. Dale apologized 3 times for bringing the children. Nadine waved it off each time without looking back. The room was large and quiet and full of light. Preston Harlow sat in a wheelchair near the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan spread below him like everything he had ever built laid flat for inspection. He was smaller than the photographs suggested. Not physically, but in the way a fire looks smaller once the room around it goes dark. Preston turned when they entered. He looked at Dale the way a man looks at something he thought he had locked away permanently, and finds sitting at his kitchen table. No file. No photograph. Just recognition, moving through him like cold water. Either of them spoke for a long moment. Dale had prepared something to say. Standing in that room, with that man looking at him like that, he forgot every single word of it. Then the physician near the door shifted forward, and stopped. Because the smallest child had quietly picked up the medication list from the side table and was reading it with the focused expression of someone who had just found something interesting. Rory walked straight up to Preston Harlow. She didn't wait for an introduction. She didn't look at the physician or at Nadine. She stood in front of a man whose name was on federal buildings, looked him directly in the eye, and asked in a voice that was small and completely serious. "Sir, do you eat the same food every day?" The room went still. Preston blinked. "My chef prepares the same meal every morning. Doctor's orders. High nutrient. Consistent." Rory nodded once. Her eyes moved from the medication list in her hand to the window, to the single wilting plant on the sill. She recognized it. Not from school. From a chapter she had read 3 weeks ago, alone in her bedroom, in a medical reference book about environmental toxins. Slow-release poisoning compounds that attach themselves to a consistent food source. Compounds that produce symptoms identical to progressive neurological decline. Compounds that were virtually undetectable unless a physician knew, specifically, to look for them in the patient's daily meals rather than in the patient's body. She turned to her father. The physician near the door took one step forward. Something about the 9-year-old's expression stopped him cold. "Dad," Rory said calmly, "I think someone's been poisoning him." 4 seconds. That was how long the room held its breath. Then Preston Harlow turned his wheelchair, slowly, the way a man moves when his whole understanding of his own life has just shifted under him, toward the door. Conrad Veal was standing in it. He had arrived unannounced. He told Nadine pleasantly that he had heard family was visiting and wanted to stop by and show his support. He was wearing a charcoal suit and the expression of a man who had absolutely nothing to be afraid of. But in the half-second before Conrad arranged his face into concern, something crossed it that had no business being there. A flash. Quick and cold and completely unguarded. Rory caught it. She had been watching him from the lobby below for 20 minutes before they ever came upstairs. She had watched the way Conrad's eyes moved, not like someone waiting, but like someone calculating. She had seen the exact moment he spotted her father stepping off the elevator. She had filed it away the way she filed everything, quietly, completely, without saying a word to anyone. Conrad smiled at the room. His eyes did not. Preston looked at his nephew, the man he had mentored, promoted, defended publicly for 15 years, the man he had invited to every table that mattered, and said nothing. Not one word. He didn't need to. Some silences aren't empty. Some silences are a verdict. The chef's name was Marcus Tibbs. He had worked in Preston's home kitchen for 6 years. He was arrested 11 days after Rory asked her question. The compound, a slow-acting neurotoxin absorbed through daily consumption, was found in the base of a spice blend used exclusively in Preston's morning meal. It had been introduced gradually over 14 months. Enough to deteriorate. Not enough to kill quickly. Just enough to make 35 of the world's best doctors chase a ghost diagnosis while the real cause sat in a jar on a kitchen shelf. Conrad Veal's payments to Marcus were traced through a shell company registered in Delaware. Conrad was arrested on a Tuesday morning. He did not raise his voice. He asked for his attorney. Preston began recovering within 3 weeks of the source being removed. Dale and the triplets went home to Decatur. The cracked dashboard was still there. The Saturday morning waffle argument picked up right where it had left off. Nothing about their apartment changed. But Dale looked at his 3 children differently now, not with more love, because that wasn't possible. With more understanding of exactly what he had been raising in that small apartment all these years. 35 brilliant physicians had examined every inch of Preston Harlow. They had tested his blood, his spine, his genes. Not one of them looked at his table. Not one of them asked what he ate for breakfast every single morning. A 9-year-old girl from Decatur, Georgia, raised on double-shift dinners and library books and her father's quiet example, walked into a room full of power and money and corruption and asked the one question nobody else had thought to ask. Justice didn't arrive wearing armor. It arrived wearing sneakers and a school backpack. And it saved a man's life with 7 words. If this story moved you, drop a comment below and tell us what hit you hardest. Was it Rory? Was it Dale? Was it the moment Preston went silent? Share your thoughts. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button right now and turn on notifications. Every week we bring you stories that remind you what people are truly capable of, and you do not want to miss what's coming next.